The night sky over Ouagadougou shimmered with an unusual stillness, as if the air itself sensed a shift in the political winds of the world. Streetlights poured gold onto the quiet avenues, where even the occasional motorcycle hummed softly, refusing to break the strange calm. Yet in the presidential palace, behind walls framed with Sahelian earth and polished steel, a storm of negotiations had begun, one no one in the West would have imagined even 6 months earlier. Burkina Faso had changed. The world was watching, and France, once the architect of West African dependency, was now the one knocking on the door. President Ibrahim Traoré stood beside a large window overlooking the capital. His military jacket, crisp and dusted with the faint scent of the desert, carried the weight of his people's expectations. He had fought battles that were physical, ideological, and spiritual. He had seen young soldiers fall, elders weep, and youths rise with hope burning in their chests. Burkina Faso was no longer bending to outside forces. It was forging its own destiny. Tonight, however, destiny was coming to him in the form of desperation. A soft knock echoed from the heavy wooden door. "President," murmured his aide, Captain Ouattara, stepping inside. "They've arrived." Traoré nodded slowly, steadying the breath of a man who understood the weight of history. "Bring them in." Minutes later, the French delegation stepped into the hall. At their head was Etienne Marceau, a senior energy envoy from Paris, a polished bureaucrat with the hands of a diplomat and the eyes of a man carrying the burden of a nation in crisis. His every movement betrayed unease. Gone was the arrogance France once wore like armor in the Sahel. Gone were the thinly veiled commands disguised as negotiations. Tonight, France wore humility and fear. As the group approached, Traoré kept his posture unbroken, a quiet testament to the new balance of power. His gaze settled on Marceau with an unreadable expression. "Monsieur le Président," Marceau began, dipping his head in a respectful bow. "Thank you for receiving us." Traoré did not return the courtesy. "France hasn't come to see Burkina Faso in many months," he said evenly. "What has changed?" The envoy hesitated, the question slicing cleanly through the room. The truth, publicly concealed behind carefully crafted statements in Paris, was simple. France was running out of options. Energy shortages, skyrocketing prices, civil unrest simmering beneath the veneer of European stability. And with Algeria tightening gas flows, Niger's uranium now off limits, and Russia's supplies caught in geopolitical crossfires, Paris found itself trembling in the cold. But admitting that to Burkina Faso, of all nations, was a humiliation carved too deeply to speak plainly. Marceau's voice softened. "The world is changing, Monsieur le Président. We are looking to rebuild relationships, restore cooperation, create new partnerships." Traoré cut in. "France seeks energy. Burkina Faso has energy. Say what you mean." Silence swallowed the room. The delegation exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, with a defeated exhale, Marceau nodded. "Yes, France is facing a severe energy crisis, and your government's new solar expansion, your green hydrogen initiative with India, and the lithium extraction projects in Gaua are of strategic interest to us." Now the truth was on the table, raw and undeniable. Traoré turned away, walking toward a large wooden map carved with the contours of Africa. He traced a finger across the Sahel, then tapped lightly on the outline of Burkina Faso. "Interesting," he murmured. "For decades, Paris believed we had no real potential, no resources, no future. You focused on Niger, on Mali, on Chad. You looked at us only as a buffer. Yet now, suddenly, Burkina Faso is essential." Marceau swallowed the sting. "Circumstances have changed." Traoré pivoted sharply, eyes blazing. "No, Monsieur Marceau. Burkina Faso has changed. We have changed our destiny. We no longer wait for others to tell us our value." The envoy stiffened. He could feel the weight of his ancestors' diplomacy slipping away. Traoré continued, walking slowly around the room. "For 2 years, you questioned our sovereignty. You criticized our alliances. You condemned our strategies. You even dismissed our people's sacrifices in the war against terrorism. But now, when France is drowning, suddenly you remember our name." Marceau lowered his gaze. "Monsieur le Président, I am not here to debate the past. France seeks partnership, not conflict." The word partnership hung in the air like a fragile offering. Traoré returned to the table. "Tell me, he said. What exactly is France asking? Marceau cleared his throat. We are requesting priority access to Burkina Faso's hydrogen program, a stake in your new solar megafarm project, and a long-term agreement for lithium supply. Traoré stared at him, expression unchanged. And what does Burkina Faso receive? Marceau straightened slightly. We can offer financial investment, technical support, and advanced energy infrastructure. And if necessary, political cooperation in Europe. The last phrase was a whisper, one of the oldest tools of French diplomacy, influence. Traoré didn't smile. Burkina Faso does not need Europe's approval for its sovereignty. That era is dead. The envoy exhaled slowly. His polished diplomacy had been stripped layer by layer, leaving the raw desperation beneath. Then what would you consider fair? Marceau asked finally. Traoré walked toward the window once more. Outside, the distant hum of generators and engines echoed through the city. Machines powered by Africa's sun, Africa's soil, Africa's ambition. Fair, he repeated. Fair would have been respect. Fair would have been listening. Fair would have been cooperation when we begged for support against terrorism. He paused. But fairness is not why you are here. You are here because Burkina Faso holds something France needs. A quiet tension pulsed through the room. France is prepared to negotiate, Marceau said carefully. We understand that the world is changing. We wish to adapt. Traoré turned, eyes sharp as blades. Do you wish to adapt, or simply survive? The question hung heavy, its meaning obvious. France was cornered, scrambling to secure energy resources. And Burkina Faso, for the first time in its post-colonial history, was in the position of power. The envoy's voice cracked slightly. Monsieur le Président, please. Our people are suffering. Traoré studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly but firmly. For decades, our people suffered while France thrived. Now the tables have turned, and you want sympathy? He shook his head. Burkina Faso is not heartless. But we will no longer be exploited. Marceau bowed his head. We are not here to exploit. We are here to cooperate. Traoré took his seat at the center of the long wooden table. Then let us speak honestly. A gesture to his aide brought maps, energy reports, and documents onto the table. Captain Salia laid them out with military precision. Traoré gestured for the French delegation to sit. What we offer, Traoré began, is a new energy future. But it will not be cheap, and it will not be one-sided. He pointed to the solar project. For access to our solar grid, France must agree to invest in manufacturing plants on Burkinabe soil, not just extract energy. He pointed to the hydrogen plan. For hydrogen, we require technology transfer. Burkina Faso will not buy machines we cannot maintain ourselves. Then he tapped the map of Gawa. And for lithium, the days of Africa sending raw minerals to Europe are over. We will export batteries, not ore. Marceau's lips parted in disbelief. These demands were radical, unthinkable even a year ago. No African nation had ever forced France into such an equal partnership. Is this your final position? Marceau asked quietly. No, Traoré said slowly. This is only the beginning. He folded his hands. Burkina Faso will not negotiate out of pity. You came to us. That means you accept our terms. But understand something clearly. Our priority is Africa. Our alliances are shifting east, toward Asia, toward BRICS, toward those who respect us. Marceau nodded slowly. We understand. Do you? Traoré pressed. Because if France tries to manipulate this agreement, the consequences will be severe. We will go public, and the world will witness France begging Africa for energy. The room froze. No one breathed. Marceau closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the humiliation. The new world order reflected back at him. I will take your terms to Paris, he said softly. Traoré nodded. Do that. As the delegation stood to leave, Traoré added one final blow that struck deeper than any political barb. Oh, and Monsieur Marceau, when you return to Paris, tell your leaders one thing. Marceau paused at the doorway. Yes. Traoré leaned forward, voice low, powerful, and unshakable. Burkina Faso is no longer the student. We are now the teacher. Dawn arrived over Ouagadougou with a quiet brilliance, spreading soft amber light across the rooftops of the capital. The city awakened gently, street vendors setting up their stands, children in uniforms weaving through the lanes, and soldiers patrolling with renewed pride. For them, life moved forward with resilience. unaware that their nation had just redefined its place in the world. But news travels fast, even when it hides behind closed doors. Rumors had already begun trickling through political corridors from West Africa to Europe. Whispers in Paris claimed that France's top energy envoy had flown to Ouagadougou seeking help. Help from a nation Paris once dismissed. In Moscow, the development was viewed with amusement. In New Delhi, it was seen as a quiet victory for emerging multipolar alliances. And across Africa, it was celebrated as another symbolic shift of power. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso's presidential palace, the atmosphere remained tense and analytical. The leadership knew France would return with counteroffers, with hesitation, with fears, with arguments. But the turning point had already been set in motion. France had approached them, not to dictate terms, but to request partnership. President Ibrahim Traoré sat at a large round table with his key advisors, Captain Ouattara, Minister of Energy Aminata Zongo, and economic strategist Dr. Issa Tapsoba. Before them lay blueprints, satellite images, and detailed proposals for Burkina Faso's new energy revolution. Traoré cleared his throat. France will respond soon. But this is not just about one negotiation. We must prepare for the real shift that is coming. Aminata Zongo leaned forward, her eyes alive with determination. Mr. President, the French demand will grow desperate. Europe is in crisis. Their gas reserves are falling, nuclear plants are unstable, and their dependence on external minerals is pushing their industries toward collapse. Dr. Tapsoba added, this crisis is global. The U.S. is focusing inward. Russia is prioritizing its allies. China and India are strengthening their influence. The multipolar world you spoke about, this is how it begins. Through necessity, Traoré nodded. Then let us act like a nation ready for that world. He rose from his seat and moved to the large African map on the wall. A map that did not carve the continent into colonial-era shapes, but displayed a proud, unified Africa, rich with its own potential. Our energy program must grow faster, Traoré declared. Lithium is our new gold. Hydrogen is our new oil. Solar power is our new independence. His voice deepened. And we must protect it like a fortress. Captain Salia straightened. We've strengthened alliances with Mali and Niger. Security around Gawa and the southern mining corridors is tighter. But with this new French interest, sabotage is possible. Traoré knew that well. When nations grow strong, shadows grow stronger too. We will prepare, he said calmly. But first, let us see how Paris responds. Their answer will reveal their intentions. Meanwhile, in Paris, the Élysée Palace was engulfed in chaos. Advisors rushed in and out of rooms carrying thick documents. Analysts argued about energy timelines, and reporters hounded officials for comments. At the center of the storm stood President Sébastien Gallard, his face pale from sleepless nights, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a nation in crisis. France, once a titan of industry and influence, was beginning to unravel. Energy shortages had shut down parts of the manufacturing sector. Protests erupted in several cities. Winter was approaching, and so were elections. When Etienne Marceau entered the room, the silence became suffocating. Well, Gallard demanded. What did Traoré say? Marceau exhaled slowly, bracing for the blow. He has conditions. Many conditions. Gallard frowned. We expected that. What are they? Marceau handed him the document. As Gallard skimmed, his eyebrows shot upward in disbelief. He wants factories built in Burkina Faso, technology transfer, control over lithium exports, manufacturing rights. His voice cracked. This is impossible, Marceau replied. Monsieur le Président, with respect, impossible is no longer an option. Our grid is collapsing. We need hydrogen. We need batteries. And we need them quickly. Gallard paced back and forth, tension radiating from every step. Burkina Faso was never supposed to have this kind of leverage. Marceau clenched his jaw. But they do. And the world is watching. If we reject these terms too harshly, we risk an even greater humiliation. What do you suggest? Gallard asked. That we negotiate. Truly negotiate. Marceau paused. There is no other path. Gallard sank into his chair, covering his face with his hands. We have no choice, he whispered. France must bend. Back in Ouagadougou within days, France sent its response via encrypted diplomatic channels. Captain Salia delivered the sealed document to Traoré, who opened it with the cautious precision of a soldier examining a landmine. His eyes scanned quickly. A faint smile tugged at one corner of his lips. "So," Traoré murmured, "France understands the new order." "What did they say?" Aminata asked, tension sharp in her voice. "They accept our demands," Traoré replied, "but they request phased implementation." Dr. Tapsoba nodded thoughtfully. "Expected. They need time to adjust." Traoré continued. "In return, they offer something unexpected." He placed the letter on the table. Minister Zongo read aloud. "France proposes a joint energy innovation center in Ouagadougou, funded entirely by Paris, but co-managed with Burkinabe experts. They also request exclusive supply of the first phase of green hydrogen production." Captain Salia raised his eyebrows. "That is surprisingly generous." Traoré shook his head. "It is not generosity. It is survival." Still, everyone in the room recognized the significance. For the first time in modern African history, France was offering partnership, not dominance. Equitable cooperation, not extraction. Respect, not manipulation. Africa had demanded a new relationship, and France was learning to adapt. Traoré tapped the table. "Prepare our counterproposal. We accept, but on conditions that further strengthen our sovereignty." Aminata smiled. "This is history in the making." Traoré nodded slowly. "Yes, and we will write it with our own hands." The announcement 1 week later, the world stood still. A joint press conference was scheduled, Paris and Ouagadougou simultaneously. Media outlets from every continent gathered to broadcast the unexpected alliance. In Burkina Faso, a stage was set in the capital's new eco-energy park, surrounded by solar panels shimmering under the morning sun. The Burkinabe flag billowed proudly behind the podium. President Traoré stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice carrying across the desert wind. "People of Burkina Faso, people of Africa, and people of the world, today marks a new chapter in global relations." He paused, letting silence build. For too long, Africa has been seen only as a source of raw materials. Today, we are reshaping that narrative. He looked straight into the cameras, unblinking. "France has approached us with a request for energy partnership. We have accepted, under conditions that ensure fairness, development, and sovereignty." The crowd murmured with excitement. This partnership is not colonial. It is not exploitative. It is not imposed. His voice strengthened. It is negotiated. It is equal. And it is built on Africa's growing power. Applause erupted. France will invest in Burkinabe factories. France will join us in developing green hydrogen technology. And France will work with us to build a new energy future, not just for Europe, but for Africa too. His gaze sharpened. "Let this be a message to the world. Africa is rising, and we will choose our partners, not our masters." At that moment, the cameras shifted to Paris, where President Gallard echoed a more humble version of the same message. His tone was subdued, almost apologetic, as he acknowledged France's dependence on Africa's innovation. The internet exploded. Headlines blazed. "Burkina Faso leads new energy era. France forced to negotiate on African terms. Sahel becomes global energy powerhouse. Africa's rising stars rewrite geopolitics." Across social media, Africans celebrated. Memes, songs, parodies, and patriotic clips flooded the digital world. Burkina Faso, once seen as a nation at the margins of global affairs, now stood at the center of a seismic shift. Behind the triumph at sunset, Traoré stood alone on the balcony of the palace, watching the city glow beneath him. The deal was historic. The future was promising. But he knew the path ahead would not be easy. Captain Salia joined him. "Sir," he said, "the military reports increased foreign interest around Gawa. Drones, some unidentified." Traoré nodded. "Expected. When Africa gains power, predators appear." Salia continued, "We've increased surveillance. Mali and Niger have sent additional support." "Good," Traoré replied. "The alliance must remain united. Our strength is our unity." He looked at the horizon, a golden line separating the burning sky from the cooling earth. "France came to us today," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, others will come as well. Europe, Asia, the Middle East, everyone will need Africa." Salia nodded. "And Africa will choose who deserves its partnership." Traoré exhaled, a deep breath carrying hope and caution. The world is changing faster than anyone expected. But Africa must never forget why we walk this path. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for dignity. He turned to Salia. This is only the beginning. A new dawn for Burkina Faso. Weeks later, construction began on Burkina Faso's first hydrogen research center. Thousands of workers were hired. Students were granted scholarships. Engineers from across Africa traveled to Ouagadougou to participate. Solar grids expanded. Lithium processing factories opened. Export agreements multiplied. The economy surged. Power returned to rural villages long forgotten. Jobs flourished. Confidence grew. And around the world, leaders took notice. Burkina Faso was no longer a footnote in global politics. It was a rising power, a source of energy, a symbol of Africa's future. France's desperation had inadvertently triggered a global awakening, an acknowledgement that Africa was no longer a continent to be exploited. It was a continent to be respected. Epilogue. Months later, President Traoré addressed the African Union in Addis Ababa. Delegates leaned forward as he delivered the speech that would be remembered for decades. Africa's destiny has never been in the hands of others. It was asleep inside us, waiting for our courage to awaken it. Today, Burkina Faso stands not as a nation begging for aid, but as a nation offering solutions to the world. He surveyed the hall, his voice echoing with unshakable conviction. Let every African nation rise. Let us turn our resources into power. Let us turn our unity into strength. Let us turn our pride into progress. The hall erupted. Traoré raised his fist. And let the world know, Africa will no longer follow. Africa leads. The applause was thunderous, an orchestral roar sweeping across the continent. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. France came for energy, but Africa found something greater, its power.